don't know, I was always a seeker from early childhood. I remember when I was a kid, someone said to me, what do you want to do when you grow up, expecting, you know, marry a rich man, because that's what sort of people were to try and do when I was young. And I said, I want to find God, and I want to give that wisdom of God to others. Of course, they thought I was quite mad. And then I remember when I was a bit older, there's that wonderful thing in the Bible where Lord Jesus gets stuck in the temple, and he has these discussions with the people in the temple, and his family can't find him, and he says, "Wist you not that I must be about my Father's business?" And that also was very much my sort of mantra as a child. I was always seeking, even when I was 10, 12 years old. And I don't know, I think I'm probably about the oldest person in the room here, but I grew up just after the Second World War, and I remember the first things I ever saw in the newspaper were these photos of atom bombs going off, you know, and if you grew up with that being drummed into your head, you know, the fact that we were about to go bang, and we used to have these sort of lectures at, you know, at school about what to do when the bomb went off. If you were a thinking person, it did something to you, and I think really that was one of the things that caused the whole hippie generation, was we realised something had got to give, something had got to change. And an awful lot of us grew up feeling that way. So I thought I was going to find realisation. I was always looking for self-realisation. I thought I was going to find it at university, so I had a go at philosophy at London University, and luckily my professor was a very sensible man. He said, "You're looking for a philosophy of life, you will never find it at London University. Go and do a degree that doesn't impinge on your seeking." And I remember him actually using that word, seeking. Well, then things went from bad to worse, because unfortunately everybody basically got caught by something, and I got caught by drugs, and I got caught by false gurus. I got caught by the TM, but I realised in about 1978 it was wrong. And by that time I had this place which had actually been an academy where they sort of did all these ghastly things in Scotland, but anyway we kicked these people out. And I was desperately seeking, and went to an astrologer. Not something I'd usually do, but anyway I was pretty desperate at that time. I was a bit like John and his microbiotics and stuff. I was trying everything. I didn't ever try drugs, but anyway, everything else. And this guy was really strange, because he said, "Is there any question you want to ask?" And I said, "Yes, I want to know if I'll ever get my self-realisation in this lifetime." And he looks at the chart. He was the Indian version astrologer, and he says, "Yes, June the 8th next year." So I kind of forgot about that, and then I was reading, like Fergie, I sort of just got all the scriptures out, you know, and went through them one by one, and I was reading the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, which is the stories of the goddess. And I remember I was saying, at this time I had a £350,000 bankruptcy case against me, because we'd kicked the TM out and they'd ripped us off big time, and obviously were trying to bankrupt us. It said, and I've never found these words again, "If you say these 3 names of the goddess, help will come within a day." And the next day a letter came through the post. I was living in Scotland, in Perthshire, and it was a letter from David Prohl with a photograph of Shri, the classic photo, and he just said, "You must come and see this lady, she is your only hope." Because he hadn't actually met Mother, but he'd been to a public programme in Caxton Hall, and enclosed a cheque for the train fare, because I know you haven't got any money, which was pretty nice of David, because he was also going through bankruptcy. Bankruptcy seemed to be the sort of name of the game for us at that time. And so anyway, there was David, who'd given me his probably last 35 quid. Well, things got interesting after that, because I took the train. I had to take the train from Rannoch Moor, which was a funny little station on the West Highland line, down to Glasgow, and then I had to change stations, and then I was due to meet Mother in, do you remember Maria, the Greek lady, in just outside Bedford, and I had to take the train to Birmingham, and then I was going to be taken to her house. So I get to Rannoch station, and there was this one man who was the porter, the station master and everything else combined, in the middle of the moor, this tiny station, and I said, "I've got to get to Birmingham," and he said, "Well, you're not going to make it, because the train from Fort William's 3/4 of an hour late. It's going to be later by the time he gets to Glasgow." And I said, "I've just got to make that train. I've got a really important meeting." So he said, "Well, don't worry. I'm the station master of Rannoch, although I'm the only person here. I'll ring up Glasgow. the train station for the trains going south, and I'll tell them that there's a really important person and that she has to, you've got to hold the train. And this was in the days when British Rail owned the railways, and they did not hold trains for nobody. So anyway, I get to Glasgow, and I took a taxi across Glasgow to the other station, and I get to the barrier, and the guy at the ticket collector, he said, "Are you the lady from Ranach?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You get on that train." He said, "They'll have your guts for gators if they know who you are." This entire express train had been held up for an hour for me. So at this point I knew something unusual was happening. So anyway, then I got to Birmingham station, and Ballacanason picked me up, and he had this funny little red Mini which he had in those days, and he drove me very sweetly and kindly to Maria's house. And it was a lovely summer day, June the 8th, of course. I didn't realise this till afterwards. The door, I remember the door of her living room was open. It was smaller than this, the living room. You remember we went there for that Ganesh Puja in '82, Bergie? Got photos of you then. Yeah. Quite a small living room. Anyway, she had a sort of garden door at the back, and I remember, and Felicity was there. And I remember sort of hovering at the back, and I just looked at Mother, and she was sitting on the sofa with the window behind her, and she was wearing a beautiful red sari. You know, she had so much hair in those days. And I just remember thinking, my God, this is who I've been looking for all my life. What went wrong, you know? Where did I get waylaid? And I just thought, this is the one. And she just said, "Come here." And I remember just walking straight up to her and kneeling at her feet and putting in, she used to have us put our forehead on her feet, which I did. And then she sort of would put her toes up a little bit, indicating for you to sort of sit up in front of her. And that's right, and while I had my head on her feet, I mean, there was, forget Chakra Charlie, forget the introductory talks, I mean, it was just straight to Mother's feet. And when I was on her feet, I saw this image of a lady riding on a tiger with this wonderful hair and red sari, and with all these weapons in her hands. You see, it was Durga, but I didn't I sort of realised because I knew quite a bit about the Indian tradition. But Mother said to me, she said, "What did you see?" And I said, I said I saw a lady with, on a tiger, and she had all these weapons, and she had this wonderful hair, and she had this red sari. And she looked at me and she said, "Yes, that's me, but in another lifetime you're very super conscious." And that was my introduction to Sahaja. So I had no problems, like most of the people in this room, realising who I was in front of. But considerable problems after that. I would like to say one thing about Greshner, actually, though, which came to my head. When we got Chelsham Road, sometime later, I had enough money down to £150. I mean, if we have time I can tell a bit about that story, but literally I bought that place for cash with 10p in the bank, because again there was this bankruptcy course sitting on my head, but somehow I managed to get enough money to buy Chelsham Road for cash. It was £41,000, rather cheap compared to what it's worth today, and none of us had any money, and Mataji wanted to come, you see, because we had this Bhumi Puja, and we just didn't have the money to buy any money for food. And I clearly remember, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember sitting around the kitchen table upstairs there, and I was saying, what are we going to do? Because none of us got any money. We've got to buy enough money for a meal, because the people are all coming and Mother's going to expect a meal. And Greshner disappeared that afternoon. And I remember you coming back and putting £100 on the table, which was quite a lot of money in 1980. And it was enough for us to buy the food. And I said, "Greshner, where on earth did you get that money?" Because you were an illegal immigrant at that point, working with no work permit. I mean, the rest of us could at least go on the dole if things push come to shove. And Greshner said, "Well, I took my bracelets to the gold exchange. And of all of us, you were the one who came up with the money for that first food." And I shall never forget that. I thought, my God, here's a real Sahaja Yogini. I mean, I was blessed with a bit of money to buy the place, although I had no money over for food. I bought the house, but I had no money to buy food. But Greshner was the one who really came up trumps. And I shall never forget that moment.